Sally, again, I want to thank you for your time today. So many people in our histamine intolerance support group have oxalate problems, whether they know it or not. And it's a topic that is kind of contentious because, you know, these are healthy foods, so we think, and people have a hard time wrapping their head around, like, do I really have an oxalate problem? And I was one of them. I can look back in my history of being in histamine intolerant support groups and going, no, I don't have an oxalate problem. And people were telling me, yes, you do. And I ignored it because I was like, I am not giving up my sweet potatoes. I love them. And then finally, the ish hit the fan, and now I know better. And my health has just continued to improve. I am fixing my histamine intolerance due to a low oxalate diet. I can tolerate way more histamine than I ever could before lowering oxalate. So I've lived to tell this story, and thanks to a lot of your information, I've been able to recover my health. So I want to thank you and all the people who suggested to me a long time ago. And I'm sorry I didn't listen to you in the beginning. So let's learn a little bit about oxalates. I know you have a couple slides prepared for us too. And can you tell us a little bit about you and your story?
Yes, well, I want to just honor you and acknowledge you for being a leader and a teacher and coming clean with your story of not being teachable, because most of us aren't very teachable. The more we think we know, and the more we cling to our lifestyles and the way we want things to be, the less chance we have to be contributed to. And so the efforts that you and I are making fall on deaf ears until someone is ready to hear it. And I just want to remind people of that, because if you yourself are, like Christine and I, hoping to help others and they're not receiving the help, it's okay. Eventually they may benefit, and it's not up to us to decide their life path. But I'm always grateful when people become teachable enough. Unfortunately, we become teachable because our life is breaking. And that's what we don't want to have happen. And now hopefully you'll learn today that you don't want to wait and break your body in a long-term chronic illness, which oxalates creates. You want to avoid doing this to yourself and your family. So yeah, so thank you for letting me acknowledge you and work with you and reach out to people who are looking for answers. I think people who are participating in groups hopefully are true seekers and will eventually kind of pick up on what we're trying to share. Yeah, I got into this the hard way by it being broken for decades and decades, and being completely shocked by the response my body had when I finally learned how to eat a low oxalate diet and did it appropriately, and learned how to watch what's going on. Because that just isn't much information. This is really quite new to the modern ear, and it quite, as you mentioned, incompatible with modern ideas about how to eat. Because what we're finding through both science and personal experience is that the foods that are touted as super great for us are super toxic, hence the name of my book, Toxic Superfoods. Like, if you're piling on these high oxalate foods, you will get sick eventually. And if you are sick, you may try to use these, quote, superfoods to get better, and it won't work. You might think it works in the beginning, and it doesn't. So I was like floored that I had unnecessarily suffered with back problems and arthritis and fatigue and you name it, all kinds of disabilities, and it was my healthy diet doing it. And I felt very concerned for others in my situation, because you can't go to a doctor or anybody who's claiming to be able to help you with your health and hear that oxalates could be the problem. And I thought, my God, there's got to be someone else out there like me. I can't be the only one. I got to start talking about it. And what surprised me even more is how many people are affected by this. And I'm beginning to think like most of us have some degree of oxalate damage that causes us to be older sooner than we should, and to die of things we shouldn't be dying of. So that's me. I'm like now going from ignorant to skeptical to research the heck out of this to prove to myself this is real. to trying to figure out how to teach it to others so that they have the opportunity to do this sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And you've been a great teacher so far. Sally has these classes she does, like small group classes, and they are incredible. You pay a little bit of money. It's like $24, I think, Sally.
Yep. And that price might go up just a tad. Got to cover the bills.
Right, I get that. But she sends you a whole package of information plus the recording. So like if you ever get the opportunity to go to one of those, definitely try and make it. But let's learn a little bit more. I do have some questions coming in the chat. I know I sent you some questions ahead of time too. People are asking what symptoms and lab testing, all of that. So do you mind just telling us what are oxalates?
Yeah, so let me share my screen. Well, we can get to that in a minute. Oxalate is this set of chemicals. It's the parent compound is called oxalic acid, and it's a tiny little molecule. And it, being an acid, it does all kinds of funky things. But primarily, what it does is upsets the electromagnetic disturbance of cells and grabs minerals. So it tends to form bonds with minerals like calcium, and calcium oxalate is the main calcium form in plants and in nature. That plants and nature uses oxalate to help manage calcium. And in the human body, the most common source of, the most common, obviously well-known problem of oxalates in the human body is calcium kidney stones. They call them calcium kidney stones. It's not really the calcium that's the problem. It's that they're oxalate kidney stones. So they're calcium oxalate kidney stones. Unfortunately, in the vernacular of medicine, they've been reduced to this idea that it's calcium stones. But a huge amount of calcification in the body has something to do with too much oxalate in the body. And most of the oxalate in our body comes from our diets. That there's a big myth out there that oxalate is made in your metabolism, so therefore it's safe and fabulous for you and you don't have to worry about it. Well, that's the biggest load of malarkey I ever did hear. And the research says very clearly that probably only 10% of the oxalate that ends up in your kidneys and turns into stones and interstitial cystitis and all kinds of other problems is coming from the body's metabolism. Another 40% is coming from vitamin C in foods and supplements, but primarily in your foods. And now, the way if you supplement, you will increase oxalate in the body tremendously. Just taking vitamin C alone can get you into oxalate toxicity. Just taking a gram up to anything over a gram a day, chronically doing that, will eventually cause oxalate poisoning in most people. So you don't even need to be in love with sweet potatoes. You can just be, even if you're not supplementing a lot of vitamin C, if you're buying a lot of commercial foods that are fortified with vitamin C, you could be drinking all kinds of C electrolyte drinks and C pseudo orange juices and, all of that. So it's more than just our attachment to spinach and sweet potatoes and almonds. It's also this ubiquitous use of vitamin C, which is now being pushed because of COVID.
Yeah, and also something that people use for histamine intolerance, because it's kind of antihistamine mast cell stabilizing, is vitamin C. So a lot of people in our group are high dosing vitamin C, and so that could be contributing to this oxalate problem. So we're kind of in a conundrum here.
Mast cell destabilization. Oxalate is the biggest culprit pissing off the mast cells. So you can't stabilize something that you're destabilizing with the same compound.
It's kind of like a merry-go-round. You can't get off.
You cannot get off, not that way. Not without cutting back on the vitamin C tremendously and the intake of high oxalate foods.
In what way does the oxalate piss off the mast cells? How does that work?
Let me show you some pictures.
Great.
How about we do that? Because I did pull up a few slides from my various slide things and even made a new one for you guys. Let's see if I can find what screen to share. Let's see if this is going to work. All right. Can you see a picture with a chemical form on it and some cleaners?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So that's oxalate. We talked about oxalic acid a second ago, and this is the compound here. It's 2 carbons with 4 oxygens on it. And in nature, it's always missing a proton over here. This hydrogen molecule is missing always at least one, so it has 1 negative charge. And it easily drops this other acid, this other proton, and has the 2 negative charges. And when it has the 2 negative charges, it hooks up to calcium. But this reactivity and ability to chelate things makes it a very good cleaning agent. You can do all kinds of cleaning tricks with it. And I have this picture of me holding this old container of oxalate because this is my mom's. I cleaned out her basement a few years ago with my help with my family. And down in her paint cabinet, she has all these oxalate cleaners because it's a great wood bleach. And when you're refinishing antique furniture, you can use it to bleach wood. It does all kinds of other tricks because of its reactivity. And maybe even that high oxygen content increases its oxidative stress. I haven't seen a lot of science about that. But consuming and being exposed to lots of oxalate from foods will lead to chronic inflammation. Often it's subclinical for a long time, but eventually it creates every misery known to mankind, aging and autoimmune conditions, and you name it, heart disease, heart attack, stroke, whatever. And it's causing vascular and injury to tissues. That is, the capillary beds and the blood vessels become weakened and fibrotic, and they become less able to deliver nutrients and oxygen to tissues. And they deliver the oxalate to the tissues, and so you get tissue injury. And in both cases, you can get this scar tissue formation called fibrosis, which is really not a good thing. Fibrosis is considered the third leading cause of death. And of course, it's often chronic inflammation that can't be reined in that causes the final blow to someone who's sick and dies. So you are risking severe cardiovascular dysfunction with the blood vessels and the heart function itself. The pacemaker and the heart muscle and the valves in the heart are all at risk of damage from oxalate coming into your heart after meals multiple times a day for years. And then oxalate tends to stick to tissues, particularly in tissues that are inflamed, infected, or injured. So anywhere that you use a lot or just where cells are naturally getting old and dying off, these are places where oxalate starts sticking and you start getting collections in the body. And having little crystals build up in the body is like having asbestosis. Okay, asbestosis is a disease of the lungs where you're breathing in fibers, and that creates chronic inflammation in the lungs and you get lung failure. But with oxalates, you're absorbing that acid, it goes into your bloodstream after meals, and then somewhere in the body, it starts forming crystals because it's stealing calcium, magnesium, and iron and other minerals and forming these little deposits on these inflamed, dead, or infected cell areas. And so now you've got it anywhere. It can be your brain, it can be your bones and bone marrow, your tendons, and your glands, especially the thyroid gland. And if you have thyroid dysfunction, that's just going to increase your risk for autoimmune diseases and problems with the immune system generally that can lead to, and the function of all cells in the body actually require you to have appropriate levels of hormones, especially thyroid. So there's all kinds of systemic and tissue-specific ways that oxalate are causing cell damage that leads to chronic inflammation. So it's all over the literature how oxalates are pro-inflammatory. And what I'd like you to think about is the immune system itself, because this mast cell is one of the immune cells. And this is what we call the innate immune cells. Everyone's born with these cells, including the mast cells. And you see that mast cells will degranulate and they'll release lots of things like histamine. These are inflammatory mediators, they're called. So these pro-inflammatory molecules like histamine are released by many immune cells. So look at all 6 of these kinds of immune cells. Every single one of them releases inflammatory immune cells. And what causes them to do that is cell damage. So this is the center of this diagram here, where you see a cell that's not a happy cell and it's releasing molecules. So that's a damaged molecule. Molecules start getting produced and released by cells, even just potassium leaking from a muscle cell or a bone cell will be detected by these cells. So these cells are hanging around in tissues and traveling in your bloodstream and moving around the body. Some of them are, have a specific role right there in your, say, your bladder lining or something. And they're there as sentries looking for problems, like, oh no, somebody's damaged our cells. We need to do something about that. So they are reactive to and they know when to react because they see the cellular damage. And one of the key ways they detect the damage is that the cells are leaking stuff. Oxalate is a great molecule for messing up your cells and causing them to be in distress, causing them to die early, causing them to be in oxidative stress or having mitochondria that don't work well and having energy shortages. So the oxalate is a big one for turning on inflammation. And it also is damaging these other non-immune cells that also release inflammation, and molecules of pro-inflammation. These molecules are communications that ride around in tissues and through the bloodstream and tells the body, oh, we need more action over here. Let's do this. Let's do that. Like, okay, we got a project over here, Fred. Let's go. Okay, so these cells that are lining the digestive tract and every single organ that you have and lining the blood vessels, those are the endothelial cells, and epithelial cells are lining everything else. And then these fibroblasts, important part of the whole keeping your connective tissue happy. But when you've got a lot of problems with these cells, the fibroblasts tend to take over, and that's where you get too much fibrosis. So this adaptive immune system, these are the T cells that learn from these guys. These guys get things started, and they start teaching these guys what to react to. And if these guys are too active all the time, they start teaching these guys to react to whatever. And if these cells are working busily on a crystal deposit from oxalate, they can teach these immune cells to start attacking that tissue or those crystals or whatever. And so you become the more years you have cell damage going on from whatever, but oxalate is our example of the day. The more this is going on, the more this goes wrong, and you start having autoimmune problems.
Sally,
yes.
I have to interrupt you. Did we start recording?
Oh, we never recorded? Oh, I'm so sorry. Wow. And let's see if we can just, okay, sorry.
Donna
Recording
said
in progress.
Donna, maybe you did some recording. Anyway, Donna said she was going to do some screen recording, so hopefully she got the beginning of that.
We did not. Yeah, we got kind of a raggedy late start. So here we are. We are recording now. We've been talking about, Christine, you may want to recap your initial comments just because now we're doing the recording of our conversation, but how you yourself were affected by, slow to acknowledge that oxalate may be part of your mast cell and histamine issues. You want to say a little?
So I will say a little bit. So I've been in a histamine support group for probably at least 4 years. And I have a myriad of health issues. And in the beginning of being in these groups, some people were saying you have an oxalate problem. And I ignored that, or not ignored it, but dismissed it, saying no to myself, like, these are really healthy foods. Like, I don't want to give up my sweet potatoes. They're so delicious. Like, my diet is so limited. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't hold my urine. I have a whole thing. And people, in the beginning were telling me you have an oxalate problem, but I just ignored it. But I couldn't ignore these symptoms that I was experiencing in this short amount of time. And it was because of the oxalates. And so since then, my health has continually gotten better every single day. Someone saying they were in complete denial too until they got kidney stone. So it's just really something to pay attention to if you have histamine intolerance or have been following like a paleo diet for a while, or keto diet, or a plant-based diet.
Gluten-free.
Gluten-free. So I know it's a little bit different than what I said earlier, but you had me thinking more about my experience. But I have a whole story I could tell.
Your experience matters so much. And I'm so grateful that you're telling your story and reaching out to others. And we all have to remember, we all come from a point of denial because the whole edifice of medicine and nutrition is in a sort of oxalate denial state, and we all share the same culture. So our own resistance is shared by everyone around us. And so there's lots of oxalate denying going on out there, rather than, I wonder if I should learn more about that. That would be a smarter response, especially since this is so freaking serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
some people in the chat are chiming in how it's turned their health around too. They had to pay attention once the symptoms really started screaming.
Yes, and this is tragic that we let it go this long, because now we've got a chronic disease that takes a long time to fully recover. It's really amazing how quickly, even when we're this sick with oxalate poisoning, how quickly things get better and how quickly we can start eating fish again and stuff like that. Like, whoa, this is not so much about the histamine that I'm eating. There's something else to it. And understanding oxalate is such a great lever for so many health problems. So we started talking about this before we remembered to record, and we're kind of midstream into getting into why is oxalate so toxic, and what is it doing to the immune system that we end up with these all kinds of reactivities, sensitivities, and this inability to eat things with histamine in them, and how this is actually a temporary problem that can be turned around, as you've testified, that now you can eat
a whole lot. Yeah, I can eat a whole lot more histamine. I'm still healing. When I go through dumping phases, my histamine gets a little higher, but then it goes back down. We operate on the bucket theory.
Yeah, well, see, your gut cells are producing a DAO that helps you break down the histamine in foods, and normally most of us have pretty decent capacity to break down that histamine. Even some people probably with leaky gut are doing okay with that. But when there's extra inflammation happening, either oxalates coming in or going out, obviously the ability of your gut cells to function well goes down. So their ability to produce the DAO enzyme is being compromised. So you have a deficiency in your ability to produce the enzymes that you need to be able to break down histamine and therefore not absorb it into your bloodstream. Your gut is set up to deal with histamines and other toxic amines, but it's a sign that your gut's not happy and something else is making your gut unhappy. It's not just that you're eating histamine and you have some particular inability. It's like we can regain our innate ability to handle some amount of histamine in the diet.
Can you show us, I think you said you had some pictures of oxalates maybe ready. And can you speak to oxalate? Is it a sensitivity? A lot of people call it oxalate sensitivity.
Well, it is a toxicity. Oxalate is a toxin. If you eat these cleaners and see how it has a skull and crossbones on it, oxalate is in these cleaners because of its ability to chelate minerals and bleach things, and it does all kinds of interesting things with some really simple techniques of having this little negative charge. So I'm kind of losing track of where we were going with this.
Sorry. You were on that slide about the mast cells and all the innate immunity. And
so explaining how the damage to cells, and we're going to call oxalate the main damager here. There's other things that damage cells, but as oxalate damages cells, they release molecules that get the whole set of innate immune cells crazy, including these poor mast cells that degranulate. They have like these little hissy fit meltdowns in their effort to protect you from this. So these cells are hanging around in your body, detecting, oh, something's bad's happening to my cells. We're going to fix it. So I think of these guys as like little knights, and they jump on their white horses and they run off to defend the damsel in distress over here who's unhappy. And if they're overactive, you basically create a war zone in your body where there's little well-meaning warriors running around and just creating a mess of all your villages and towns. And it's just like, it's not good to live in a war zone. Just isn't. It's never good to live in a war zone. And this war zone activity should be very brief and specific. And it should be like a very, what do we used to call, I don't know, there's terms in war talk about how you can do a very targeted, precise thing. Well, we'll just take out so-and-so's line in their power plant and shut them down. Like, we'll do this little thing. And that's what the inflammation will just be brief to help you recover. The point of this activity is to help you repair and replenish the damaged tissue. But if this is going on all the time, you get all kinds of long-term chronic inflammation, which is basically the cause of human suffering and not good. And oxalate has these different ways of affecting cells and promoting inflammation. I was trying to throw this together for you this morning. It's not beautiful yet, but here's a list, a preliminary kind of short list. It's already overwhelming to have 8 items on one slide, I realize. You are a mineral grabber, oxalate. You're grabbing minerals with this little charge here, the 1 or 2 positive charges. You're causing mineral malnutrition in a person who eats a chronic high oxalate diet. You're not getting enough calcium and other minerals from your diet when you eat a lot of sweet potatoes and spinach and high oxalate foods. You also, once the oxalic acid gets in the bloodstream, it's disturbing your calcium levels and other electrolyte levels in the blood, but it also can be occurring down at the tissue level. So right there in a heart muscle or any kind of nerve or muscle, if the electrolytes are messed up, the cells can't function properly. And that can create things like heart block, which is a failure of the pacemaker, where you go into arrhythmia and the heart stops beating appropriately and you drop dead of a heart attack. That can just be because of low calcium in the blood. And often with oxalate poisoning, if someone dies from it, it's usually a heart attack that finishes them off because of this disturbance in the calcium levels in the blood that messes up the pacemaker. But you see, the electrolyte disturbance just creates unhappy nerves and muscles generally. So you can get a lot of brain inflammation and crazy symptoms when your nerves aren't working right. You can have paralyzed gut function, or you can have overactive spastic muscle function where you have diarrhea or hiccups or GERD, or all kinds of ways that sphincters and other muscles aren't working well because the electrolytes are messed up in the nerves and the muscles. Direct cell damage from oxalate messes up membranes and cell structures. It promotes a situation of oxidative stress where the cells have to use up their glutathione and they're not able to produce enough to dampen down all this inflammation that's being created by both the oxalate directly and the cell damage, especially the mitochondrial damage, is very pro-inflammatory in cells. It's going to disrupt the use of calcium inside cells for their own self-regulation. It's really messing up their whole inner communication and function of cells. And enzymes that work in the mitochondria and in the various organelles that do work get interfered with, and you have trouble with energy production in cells from the enzyme interference. And then with the mitochondrial dying, you'll have additional energy production problems that become chronic. And this can lead to things like fibromyalgia and so on, where you just don't have enough mitochondria and don't have good blood flow either. We talked before we started recording about some of the vascular damage that can occur. And then as you continue to eat oxalate in and out, day in and day out, crystal deposits develop, and they tend to develop in areas where you have chronic inflammation, or you have infection, or you have injury, or you just have cells dying, and cells die every day. But the sort of cellular debris that goes with cell death and cell illness, you might say, is undefensible material upon which oxalate just naturally sticks to those little remnants of vacuoles and proteins that come from the cell debris. So we end up filling up with deposits. The thyroid gland, for example, a very popular place to be collecting crystals. Not a good thing to be collecting crystals. But if you've got this pro-oxidant oxalate disturbing your cells, then anything can go wrong. Unfortunately, as we just saw, there's so many ways in which the cells are being damaged. And damaged cells means damaged tissues, means a damaged life in the long run. If it's too many cells and starting to really affect the sort of meta control of the way nerves and muscles work, the way your glands and hormones are being produced, and so on. So you've got all kinds of issues with oxalosis. Means oxalate accumulation or high oxalate in the body that leads to these crystal deposits, which will dysregulate your metabolism of all kinds, including blood sugar control, and you will end up with some kind of disease in the long run, even if it just looks like early aging, dementia, arthritis, osteopenia, and so on. But these are not good when you have broken enzymes, you don't have enough energy in the cells, your mitochondria are dead and dying or struggling, and all of that creates chronic inflammation. Every one of these things promotes the immune system going, my cells are in trouble, my cells are in trouble, my cells are in trouble. And they keep telling everybody, they keep putting out cytokines, putting out messengers that says, my cells are in trouble, my cell. And so you get into this chronic inflammation that can become an autoimmune condition. Oxalic acid is an anti-metabolite. So what I was saying before, it's interfering with the metabolism in cells. It's blocking enzymes. It is a pro-oxidant, and it especially damaging to immune cells. So you can damage immune cells after your spinach smoothie. There was one study that showed it only took 40 minutes after modest spinach smoothie to cause those cells, those circulating monocytes in the blood, to start throwing out pro-inflammatory cytokines and showing damage to the cells, the immune cells. So now you've damaged your immune cells after you've eaten spinach, a smoothie, etc. But you're also going to have crystal formation in the body. Now, the ion itself is bad enough, but the crystals, these little things around the bottom of this are meant to be oxalate crystals, and the red is illustrating the sort of electromagnetic toxicity that they have. And this thing in the middle is a cell, is a cartoon of a cell. And it's showing a cell membrane, which has 2 layers of fats in a cell membrane. And there's certain kinds of fats that only belong on the inside called phosphatidylserine. But when a crystal comes along, it flips. And so these little yellow blobs here, this is the polar end of the fatty acids here. They're flipping to the outside. They call this the outer leaf. So you see on this side where the crystals are, you get this inversion where the inner membrane molecules flip over to the outer membrane. Now, this is something that your immune cells don't like. When they detect that, they know this cell needs to be taken away. So they'll come along and eventually clear away that cell. But in the meantime, you've got crystals inside the cell. And when the cells pick up, the cells will internalize these crystals and put them in these little vacuoles called liposomes, which can later break it back down into the oxalic acid ion again. And that ion can go ahead and grab some other calcium that's messing up cell function, but also it's creating this oxidative radical. See this O2 with extra? This is reactive oxygen that collapses and damages, kills off your mitochondria, increases more, and that death creates more reactive oxygen species, more inflammation and oxidative stress. And taking vitamin C does not fix that. Taking vitamin C increases that. It's incredible that we think that's so good for us. I'm really concerned about that. So other things happen that all of this kind of stuff, this is osteopotin and so on. We don't have time to get into lactate dehydrogenase, but this goes up. You're going to get more internal oxidate production as well when this is up, because this stuff will help turn more stuff into oxalate. And this is osteopotin is trying to control the crystal formation in the body. It's trying to keep you from getting kidney stones. If your kidneys are stressed, a lot of tissues can put out this molecule. If it's chronically high, that will lead to fibromyalgia and cancer. There's other mechanisms for that cancer development too. I'm going to show you one in a minute. Intracellular calcium gets grabbed by the oxalate. So the endoplasmic reticulum stores calcium and then it pushes it out into the cell when it's trying to tell the cell, hey, let's do this, let's do that. But you got these oxalate ions that come in, they start grabbing the calcium, and that's like taking the messenger and killing the messenger. So if you're a kingdom and you got to tell your neighboring town to go do such and such or bring us a load of corn or hay or cotton, you send your messenger guy out there to say, okay, bring us some cotton. And the messenger gets kidnapped on the highway and the message never gets there. So the cell function starts breaking down when you have oxalate ions getting into cells and grabbing the calcium that's supposed to be helping the mitochondria and the cell function. That's really interesting science. We could spend hours talking about calcium in cells and how important it is as the universal, as they call, secondary messenger. So the endoplasmic reticulum is this very interesting organelle that stores calcium and does a lot of other things. But you can see when the endoplasmic reticulum is unhappy because there's oxalate around, you got some big cell problems. And this can lead to cell death. Okay, so crystals forming in your tissues will create all kinds of issues depending on where it's collecting, and where it collects in any particular person is very idiosyncratic. But you're going to get tissues that now are in a state of chronic inflammation. That's called arthritis and other itises of having chronic inflammation. So it's not too unusual to end up with facet joint arthritis in the back, like I have, thanks to my oxalates. That can be pretty disabling and make you a pretty sucky old person pretty fast. So here's an example of science where there's only a couple of studies that connect oxalate directly to cancer formation. There's lots of studies that say, well, osteopontin creates cancer and this and that. Like, you can see different other mechanisms, but there's two studies that are fairly recent that looked at either the ions or the crystals. This is the one with the ions. There's another one that this is the one with the crystals. There's another study that showed that ions do the same thing. And what's happening here in this is what they call a visual abstract of this study from 2019, is that because there's crystals in your breasts, the breasts are prone to collecting oxalate crystals, probably because breast cells know how to concentrate calcium. And oxalate and calcium are attracted to each other. So oxalate tends to go in places in the body where there's a lot of calcium. So the calcium, having crystals in your breast is not good. That's a danger signal. That's a problem. And immune cells try to manage it, but if they're not managing it in a way that's insulating it from the local cells, they're going to try to eat it. And these monocytes come along, and macrophages try to eat the crystals. And that is often difficult to do. And they get into this cycle of what we call frustrated phagocytosis. And that causes a change in these standard breast cells and turns them into these weird sort of stem cell-like cells that can migrate around and become cancer. And so this is transformation, this transforming this normal breast cell into these cells, and these cells create both cancer cells and this additional calcification in the breast that is hydroxyapatite, is the mineral of bones, because you're changing the epithelial cells into bone cells. And the way what's happening is you're just reading a different part of the genome. Each cell is supposed to express certain parts of the gene to be the cell that it's supposed to be. And you can start turning them into something else when you damage it with oxalate, and they start becoming bone producing cells. This same mechanism of transforming normal epithelial cells into bone producing cells occurs in the vascular system as well. The arteries have muscles around them, and those muscles become bone cells, and you create hardened arteries. And oxalate is a major trigger for making that happen. So we've got this recent study that shows that oxalate creates cancer in the breast and the calcifications associated with very malignant and aggressive cancers. And the other study, I don't think I put the slide in here for you guys, showed same thing with this cancer cells coming from the ions as well. So both the crystals and the acid can create breast cancer, and based on just a limited number of studies. And I think too that once you're full of crystals, by the way, your chances of becoming a breast cancer person continue even on the low oxalate diet, because the low oxalate diet promotes this engagement of let's get rid of the crystals effort. So once you quit eating oxalate, the body is more likely to try to get rid of these crystals. And so you're still at risk for developing breast cancer, especially if these endothelial cells have the wrong fats in them. If you have a history of eating bad foods like, crackers and cookies and commercial things full of trans fats and these rancid oils and soybean oil and so on, canola oil, those are the kinds of things where there's nutritional deficiencies in here. I think those are the risk factors that make this process of trying to get rid of these crystals a risk for cancer. You do not want to let your body fill up with crystals of oxalate. That should just be a known thing. All kinds of other problems, so it's not really just cancer. I think cancer is a fairly minor part of oxalate poisoning, and a lot of us, the oxalate itself is deadly to the cancer cells. So I think oxalate sometimes creates the cancer cells, and then the cancer cells die because oxalate kills them too. So I don't think it's a huge risk for most of us, but I think it depends on nutritional status and the general state of inflammation and the health of your body that is mostly a product of the way we eat and live. So there's granuloma disorders of all kinds are definitely oxalate related. And here's our mast cell. Okay, so oxalate bothers the immune cells, especially the mast cells. So if you've got a lot of oxalate, either ionic acid or the crystals, the calcium oxalate crystals, you are more likely to have these guys overproduced and overreactive and probably throwing out too much histamine. So that, again, mast cells, their major job is to be that sensor of cell danger that we saw in that earlier cell. So you're creating danger to cell when you have a caustic acid and dangerous crystals, nano and micro-sized crystals around your cells. So injured tissues, inflammatory molecules, triggers include bacteria, foods, toxins, antibiotics, toxins, that would be oxalate, and pain medications. And there are many other factors that affect like histamine and your ability to produce the histamine degrading enzymes. So you could be on certain medications, like I think some of the hypertension medications and other things that are influencing your inability to break down the histamine. But, the symptoms of histamine include the rashes, asthma, and headaches, and spasms, and all kinds of stuff. And interesting, this cold sensitivity, I think this whole process is also involved in a condition called Raynaud syndrome, where you become someone whose vascular system can suddenly snap down and stop the flow of blood into your fingers. That. Okay. Yeah. So it's really common when we've oxalate poisoned ourselves. That's a common problem to have, is that Raynaud syndrome. But bladder pain, endometriosis, migraines, these are all inflammatory conditions. Like the immune cells in your bladder start getting trained up to be very reactive to the oxalate that you pee out, because your bladder is the final stop for oxalates as they're leaving the body. The kidneys clear the oxalate out of the bloodstream, and the poor bladder has to hold them every day it's holding oxalate crystals and oxalate ions. And some people, just their immune cells are over it and they get this interstitial cystitis. It's very disabling and upsetting and ruins your sleep. And when you can't sleep, you become a pretty miserable person who's having a tough time with every aspect of emotional and mental good health and cognitive function.
Before I realized oxalates were an issue for me, I was peeing 1 million times a day and had interstitial cystitis and incontinence and all the things, vulvodynia, all of that. But yeah.
All of that. And that's because your immune cells love you.
Right. It was like, get it out.
They're upset because this toxin is really damaging the bladder and these tissues, and they've just over it. And they're just and it's so amazing that the body can pull back from that and stop. Even on a low oxalate diet, sometimes the level of oxalate in your bladder continues to be high in little spikes. But at that point, the body takes little breaks and it goes on and off, putting oxalate into the urine. And so those little breaks are enough to let everything reset and improves your tolerance for oxalate in your urine. It's quite cool. I mean, the body is really wanting to do the best it can and make your life as good as it can. You just aren't cooperating. But once you start cooperating, it's going to reward you, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
You are giving us so much information. And I know that a lot of people in the group, this is like one of the first times they've ever heard of oxalates. Can I ask you a few kind of rapid fire questions?
Yes. So for the beginners, there's the beginner's guide.
Which you have on your website, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I shared Sally's website in the chat, as well as some other links for her book.
We can stop sharing. I'll just share with you.
Yeah, please.
Last two images. This book where I've tried to summarize all this stuff in a sort of simple, like get through it kind of way that talks about more than just like the mechanisms of disease and how to get better, but try to explain why you don't know about this and why we're missing the boat and what's wrong with the current nutrition of, ideas. And so I think this is helpful to have in your wheelhouse if you are debating, like, what is a healthy diet with people. Some of what I've put into this book might help you make sense of it for yourself and for others. So if any of you are willing to pre-order that, we might even be able to make it like a little bestseller when it comes out in December, because enough of us will have all queued up to buy it on that same day. So
I ordered it as soon as I could pre-order.
That's awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other again.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Oh, so there are a lot of questions with testing. Like, can we test for oxalates? Can you talk a little bit about that and like the oats test or blood work? Is that a good way to test?
Well, if you've got oxalate crystals in your thyroid gland, irritating your thyroid, or in your pancreas, making it a little unhappy or whatever, do you think a random urine test will really tell you that that's going on or not? That's not possible to in any kind of accumulative toxicity disease. It's not possible to quantify how filled up you are with this stuff. But the urine is definitely the major exit route for oxalates. So if you're lucky and you do a single catch test like the oats test, you'll often see it, but you won't every time. So if you get a high value in an oats test, that should be taken quite seriously, because that means your poor kidneys and bladder are working too hard and it's really toxic. But if you get a normal or a low oxalate level in a urine test like the oats test, that could mean, well, you just caught it at the wrong moment, because especially once you're on and off oxalates, the amount of coming out of your urine is going to be very up and down. But that we know that it would take 9 urine tests to guess the average amount of oxalate you pee out in a day. 9. No one's going to get it 9 times. That would be $1,000+ to do that. No one's going to do that. So one negative test does not tell you whether or not, it doesn't say, oh, I'm off, I'm scot-free, I don't have an oxalate problem. Or it won't tell you later, oh, I've quit my oxalate, now I'm all better because I got a normal test. Forget it. That is not how it works. So the only way to really test for oxalate is to become a cadaver and like test the whole body for how much oxalate is there. Or if you're not yet a cadaver, but you're really sick, they might be willing to take a chip of bone out of your hip. And if that sample happens to be where your oxalates are, that will show that you've got oxalates accumulating in the body. But the plasma test, even for people who are in renal failure, who are dying of oxalate poisoning or have obvious oxalate poisoning, sometimes the plasma oxalate levels are normal. So they're not a good, like, this is why you don't, if you could easily test for it, we would all know this was a problem. We wouldn't be this ignorant about it if we had ways to test it. That's a major reason why we don't know about it.
What about candida and oxalate? So, and mold exposure. So a lot of us with histamine intolerance, they say like root causes are candida or mold. And some people say mold and candida causes an oxalate problem.
There's no evidence that candida produces oxalate at all. The aspergillus produces oxalate, and people will breathe in aspergillus, and you can get an aspergillus oxalate problem in the lungs, and you can definitely have oxalate coming from aspergillus mold. However, if you're really worried about chronic mold infection, you need an immune system that can beat the mold infection. And you don't have an immune system that will beat the mold infection or the sinus infections or the UTIs or you name it if you're eating oxalates a lot. Because you remember what we just saw about the oxidative stress caused in immune cells themselves. They're damaged after every smoothie and sweet potato and keto muffin full of almond flour, the dark chocolate, all these things. And right after you're eating them, within an hour, you've already damaged your immune cells. Your immune system is not able to manage these infections, and chronic infection is a sign and symptom of oxalate poisoning, not the other way around. It's not that oxalate poisoning is happening because you have this mold infection and the mold is producing it. Absolutely unlikely in most cases.
I can tell you from my personal experience. I had chronic yeast infections, vaginal yeast infections for years that were unresponsive to treatment. And I don't have them anymore. So
me and my chronic sinus infections, I had chronic sinus infections at least since I was age 17 until I was 49 and went on this diet, and I haven't had one since, and I'm 58 now.
Yeah, it's incredible.
All the time. Sometimes it takes, if you're really, really sick and you're like, your whole gut is just nothing but biofilms and disaster, it might take 2 or 3 years on the diet to see really start cleaning these out. But we will see people flushing out all kinds of yuck from their bodies after they've been on the diet long enough. And a lot of that is the body finally clearing all these resident infections. In fact, the crystals form around these infections. So the crystals, when you're getting them out of your body, will start releasing Epstein-Barr and herpes viruses. You might get, like, I got one of my very only cold sores happened after I went on this diet because I was releasing the herpes virus. And same with Epstein-Barr. I had both Epstein-Barr virus and Lyme disease show up around year 4 of this diet, and I needed to take 1 round of Doxy to like finally knock it out, and I'm fine now.
Is there a genetic component to being more susceptible to oxalate toxicity?
Yeah, definitely. There's metabolic variants of a million stripes that affect your metabolism and make it more and more stressful to be toxic, with eating a toxin like oxalate. And it's so complicated, and we're so new to understanding the meaning of the genome, and have very little good ways to see how well things are expressing. I think the point of the oats test was partially trying to gauge what's going on with your metabolism, regardless of how much of it is inherent genetics or just genetic expression that's occurring because of modern factors that will, inherited factors too. You can inherit these sort of expression of your genes, how genes are being used and turned on or turned off. There's lots of lifestyle factors that impact that. So it's really hard to say how much of it is your inherent genetics versus how much of it is our lifestyle or your parents' and grandparents' lifestyle that's changed how your genetics are being expressed. Just because you have an allele or you're hetero or homozygous for whatever, it doesn't mean that that's actually expressing. And I think some combination in the future of like looking at the genome and tests like the oat test, maybe something that's even better than that test, which is prone to problems and inaccuracies of all kinds. We might know that, but honestly, if you're a living being, oxalate's going to be toxic. It's just a matter of some people can get away with a high oxalate diet longer than others and appear to be fine. I have a friend like that, but I still think he's at risk for sudden death for a heart attack or stroke. Even though he seems fine now, there's still this subclinical problem lurking that's affecting your well-being, whether it's showing up as symptoms or not. So yes, I would say there is a genetic part of this, but the bigger piece about whether you can handle oxalate is how leaky is your gut. You'll absorb a ton more, huge amount more if you have leaky gut. How is your kidneys doing? Are they now struggling? One reason you might have a low O test is because your kidneys are failing in their ability to remove oxalate. So when your kidneys start clogging up with oxalate, it starts sticking and becoming kidney stones and nephrocalcinosis and getting stuck in the kidney and doesn't show up in the bladder at all. And you could be really sick with oxalate and have a very low oxalate level just because you're no longer able to excrete it. So how much is getting into your blood and how quickly and how well it's getting out of your blood matter a lot. And that's just the state of your health. That's not really necessarily genetic, although genetics affect who gets kidney stones and who doesn't, right? So a lot of us, we can eat a lot of oxalate and not get kidney stones. I have great kidneys that don't get kidney stones.
Where can we find a reliable list for figuring out the foods that are high oxalate or the oxalate content? We struggle with histamine lists. All the lists that we see are different, and same thing for oxalate lists. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I just actually on Sunday put out a post on my blog, on my website, which is sallyknorton.com. So the most recent post as of September is this big long post about the problems with the data. And the modern testing that's been published, that's available to the public, is through the Volver Foundation, but that's not convenient to use in any way. And the Triangle Oxalate group try to take that data and some other data and create a spreadsheet, and that's more convenient to use if you know how to read it. But it has, many errors in it. So I've been working on a database, and we'll be issuing a big, detailed, curated, says, okay, there's all of these 18 tests of spinach. How do we guesstimate how much is in the spinach and so on? So that is coming, but you don't actually need that detailed a list generally. If you just use like my beginner's guide list and get off that really toxic foods, that is an excellent place to start, and not like get your head all in a ball of wax over the data. Just recognizing which ones are really toxic. And the other thing is, you don't want to, a carnivore diet has zero oxalate, right? A diet that doesn't have plants in it doesn't have oxalate in it. That's a very therapeutic shift from an oxalate point of view that can be too strong and too dramatic. So knowing too much about where the oxalates are could get you in trouble faster, because moving too fast into low oxalate diet promotes that activity that increases inflammation in the body eventually. Not everybody starts reacting right away, but there is a process of deaccumulation that has to happen, which involves inflammation, involves those 4 phagocytes, and there's immune activation. So you don't really want to get your whole body and immune system all excited about, oh, now you stopped eating the oxalate, did you little devil? Now I've got to clean up this mess. And if it's really eager to clean up the mess, it can make you sick all over again, and you can be sicker on the low oxalate diet. So I wouldn't sweat do not try to be perfect on low oxalate diet. Try to be deliberate and aware, and maybe keep track of what you're doing. And then, come join the community to start really refining that. And in a few months, we'll have a bigger data list that should be pretty trustworthy. But read my blog post and you'll hear more about, the data is going to naturally be a little tricky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have glanced at those lists and databases, and I'm like, nope, this is too much for my brain. I'm just going to focus on the big hitters, and I regularly clear my accumulation. So you don't have to be perfect for it to help you.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the relationship of oxalates and salicylates? Because we find that if people have an oxalate problem, they tend to not be able to tolerate salicylate.
Well, like histamine and oxalate, salicylate is a poison. And like them, we have different levels of capacity for dealing with them in any given day. Or, the more you're toxic with one toxin, the more you're just broken to deal with toxins generally. So once you start cleaning up the oxalate toxicity, these other things get easier to deal with. And salicylates, in a way, are sort of easy to avoid, but it's one more set of incomplete, unreliable lists. But I do, for people I'm working with, I can give you a low salicylate, low histamine, low oxalate set of foods, but you're going to be working with more animal foods in the diet to do that. So the plant-centric fantasy isn't going to work if you're toxic. Mm-hmm. And of course, eating those high salicylate, high histamine, high oxalate is really the biggest problem. So I don't know if that helps or not, but I would say there just isn't any solid research layering all these problems and the relationships between them.
Yeah. I know we've gone over on time already. I don't know if there's any last things you want to say. Give us some hope, maybe, because a lot of people in our group are very desperate for answers, and
your body,
anybody.
Your body loves you. It wants you to be whole and healthy more than anybody, and it's going to help you be well if you will help it. And it's really not that hard. This changing from spinach to lettuce is not hard. It just isn't. In our head, we can't live without sweet potatoes. I was addicted to my sweet potatoes maybe because we have a carb addiction, and we're cheating ourselves and not eating enough protein and butter, and we've been taught to fear meat and protein, and so there's lots of things that are getting in your way, but they don't have to get in the way, and there's plenty of support and encouragement for this. So I don't think there's anything easier than avoiding toxins and feeling better, and you get rewarded usually soon enough where you see how valuable it really is.
Yeah, I can give personal experience on that of seeing the quick reward. Can you just give us a quick answer on what are the highest oxalate foods?
Yeah, so in the leafy green department, there's only 3. It's really easy: spinach, chard, and beet greens. Chard and beet greens are the exact same vegetable, so it's almost 2. That's it. All the other green leafies are fine. Even most of the kales are fine if you're eating them in moderation. They're not easy to digest, the kale, so I still think you should be cautious about kale, but not because of oxalate necessarily. And then the beans, most of black and white beans and classic beans are not good. They're high oxalate, but the peas, the black-eyed peas and green peas and chickpeas are much lower, so you can switch to them. The nuts, most of the nuts are terrible, especially almonds, cashews, and peanuts. Definitely get rid of those from your diet. There's seeds. Chia is probably the worst, and things like poppy seed, which, so skip the poppy seed bagel. Sesame is not so great, and hemp is not so great. In spice department, turmeric is the king of the bad guys. Just like whole root turmeric is not your friend. You can use curcumin extract that's much lower, may even be 0. So you can use it as a flavoring or however you like, but just don't use the whole root turmeric. In the fruit department, you've got kiwi, pomegranate, star fruit, and blackberries are probably the worst ones. And then what else? Oh yeah, the grains. The gluten-free grains like quinoa, buckwheat, and teff are a disaster. So, and plantains and arrowroot and some of these sort of things that you're having instead of gluten stuff is bad. And then there's sweet potatoes and white potatoes. The baking potatoes that we use to make French fries and potato chips are terrible. So something like your black pepper is not too good. Black pepper potato chips, 0 nutrition, 100% toxic in every way. So it's not a huge list though, and there's a lot of other foods to eat.
Mm-hmm. What about cassava?
Cassava, yeah.
We tend to eat a lot of cassava. It's a lot of the low histamine vegetables like beets and chard and almonds become a staple of our diet on a low histamine diet, which I think can kind of lead people into having more oxalate problems.
For sure. Oh, no question about it. I mean, it might seem like it's helping a little bit, but it's probably not. No, it's just ultimately going to make you sicker and sicker and more likely to have longer term problems. So, yeah. In so many cases, we're stuck with this, like the solution is the problem.
So can you just tell everybody where they can find you? I know I dropped some things into the chat, but if they want to work with you, have more questions, where can they find out more information?
Please come to my website. That's the best place to reach out to me, and that's sallyknorton.com. That's the easy thing. I am on Instagram, but I've been so busy, I haven't even had time to do a lot of posting, and I've got way too many DMs going on right now. So the website is the place to learn a lot, get a cookbook there. There's a PDF there with almost 200 recipes, and there's some free recipes on the site. There's lots of information there. That's a great place to start, and you can reach out to us there. You can sign up for a group class, a small group classes. We're having one today, and then you'll have opportunity to sign up for a consult if you come to a class.
Yeah, that's, like I said earlier, I think before we start recording, those classes are amazing. You get so much information, a packet of information. They're incredible. So thank you. We're going to post this recording where?
YouTube. It'll be on my YouTube channel, which is, I think, called Be Free to Thrive. I can't even remember. I'll send you that. I will put it in. Yeah. You can find me on YouTube. I mean, I'm findable now.
Yeah. And I will put the link in the group, obviously, for this conversation. So sorry that we forgot to record the beginning.
Yeah,
Zoom jitters that get to you.
Yeah,
or get to me.
Trying to pack a lot in. We're trying to rush to get things done. And
right. Yeah, well, I hope this opens up more discussion in our histamine intolerance support group. I think that you've helped a lot of people here and clarified a lot for some of us. There's a lot of moderators on here, so I think they are getting a lot out of it too. So we really appreciate your time and expertise. And
it's so great to have people learning about this out there. It's really exciting. I'm counting on all you guys to pass it forward and help other people and make this a more widely known thing, because they're not finding help from professionals. So we have to do it at the grassroots level. So I honor the fact that you're all trying to help each other, and hopefully I can help you guys help each other in a more right direction than we used to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again. And thank you everybody who was able to attend live.